Have you ever noticed this? The moment something good finally arrives, real love, more money, peace, recognition, your body doesn't relax, it tightens. Your chest feels strange. Your breath becomes shallow. Part of you almost wants to pull back or ruin it. And that's confusing, isn't it? Because you worked for this, you prayed for this, you told yourself, if I ever get here, I'll finally feel safe. So why does it suddenly feel dangerous? Most people rush to label this as self-sabotage. Others call it imposter syndrome. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't you being broken, and it's not a lack of confidence. What you're feeling is your nervous system reacting to expansion as if it were a threat. Your mind might be saying, this is good, this is what I wanted, but your body is whispering something else. This doesn't feel familiar. Stay alert. And that inner conflict between what you desire and what your body can tolerate is one of the most misunderstood experiences of growth. In this video, we're not going to talk about motivation hacks. We're not going to shame fear or force positivity. Instead, you're going to understand why good things can feel unsafe even when you consciously want them. How early conditioning quietly wires success, calm, and happiness to danger, and how a hidden shadow fear of expansion pulls you back toward familiar suffering without you even realizing it. Because once you see this pattern clearly, something shifts. You stop fighting yourself, you stop blaming your mindset, and you start working with your body instead of against it. So if you've ever wondered, why can't I just enjoy what I worked so hard to create? Stay with me. Because to understand why success feels unsafe, we have to start with the body, not the mind. Your body doesn't chase what's good, it chases what's familiar. That single sentence explains more about your anxiety than years of positive thinking ever could. Most of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that life is something you endure, not something you relax into. And the nervous system learns this lesson very early, long before language, logic, or self-help books. If calm, joy, or abundance were absent in your early environment, or worse, if they were followed by punishment, chaos, or emotional withdrawal, your body didn't register them as safe. It registered them as unstable. So your nervous system made a quiet, intelligent decision. Stability equals danger. Alertness equals survival. Imagine a child growing up in a chaotic home. Arguments appear without warning. Affection is unpredictable. Peace never lasts long. In that environment, the child learns something crucial. The calm moments are not rest. They're the calm before the storm. So when nothing is happening, the body stays vigilant. When tension rises, the body relaxes, because at least now it knows what to do. Fast forward to adulthood. That same nervous system might be living in a quiet apartment with a stable job, a healthy relationship, and more money than ever before. And yet, drama feels strangely normal. Stillness feels eerie. Success feels suspicious. Because success doesn't bring urgency. It doesn't bring chaos. It doesn't flood the body with adrenaline. And without those familiar signals, the nervous system panics. This is where most people misunderstand trauma. Trauma is not constant pain. Trauma is not always abuse or disaster. Trauma is what your nervous system learned to expect in order to feel safe. If your system learns safety through vigilance, struggle, or emotional intensity, then peace will feel foreign, and foreign often feels dangerous. So when something good finally arrives, love, money, recognition, freedom, your anxiety isn't warning you about failure. It's reacting to unfamiliar safety. Here's the small but powerful lesson to take from this. Nothing is wrong with you for feeling anxious during success. Your body is doing exactly what it was trained to do. The problem isn't that you're broken. The problem is that your nervous system has never been properly introduced to ease. And once you understand that, something shifts. You stop judging yourself for feeling tense when things go well. You stop forcing gratitude before your body is ready. And you begin to ask a deeper question. What happens when growth asks me to expand beyond the identity I survived with? That's where the story goes next. Because understanding your nervous system is only the first layer. Beneath it lies something even quieter and more powerful. The shadow fear of expansion. Growth doesn't just add more. It removes your old identity. And that's the part no one warns you about. When people talk about growth, they usually describe it as gaining something. More money, more confidence, more freedom, more love. But from the nervous system's point of view, expansion is not a gain, it's a loss. Because growth quietly threatens the roles that once kept you safe. The struggler, who knew how to survive pressure. The fixer, who felt valuable by holding everything together. The invisible one, who stayed safe by not being seen at all. These roles weren't chosen consciously. They were adaptations, and they worked. They gave you belonging. They gave you predictability. They gave you an identity your nervous system learned how to defend. So when expansion arrives, it doesn't just change your circumstances. It destabilizes your sense of self. And it doesn't stop there. Growth also threatens your bonds. When you start to change, some people can no longer relate to you in the same way. They don't need you as much. They can't define themselves against you anymore. Or they quietly benefit from you staying small. Your system senses this, long before your mind can explain it. And that's where the shadow fear of expansion begins to whisper. If I grow, I'll be alone. If I succeed, I'll be exposed. If I'm happy, something bad will follow. These fears aren't irrational. They're memories. You may see them play out in very real ways. People sabotage relationships right after they become healthy, when love is no longer chaotic or earned through pain. Entrepreneurs feel panic after their first big win, when the familiar struggle disappears and responsibility expands. Creatives freeze when their work finally gets attention, because being seen was never part of their survival plan. In all of these cases, the mind says, "This is what I wanted." But the body says, "Who will I be if I don't struggle anymore?" Here's the paradox. Failure feels painful, but familiar. Success feels neutral, but destabilizing. Failure confirms your old identity. Success dissolves it, and the nervous system interprets that dissolution as a kind of threat. Not because expansion is dangerous, but because identity loss feels like annihilation to a system built for survival. So the lesson here is subtle, but crucial. Your resistance to growth is not laziness. It's not fear of success. It's your system protecting an identity that once kept you alive. And until that identity is acknowledged, not shamed or rushed away, your body will continue to treat expansion as something to escape from. But this is only the surface, because beneath identity, there's something even deeper shaping your reactions. A hidden loyalty, a quiet attachment to suffering itself. And that's what we need to look at next. Sometimes you're not afraid of losing good things. You're afraid of betraying your past. By the time most people reach success, they assume the hardest part is over. But for many, that's when a strange resistance appears, one that logic can't explain. This resistance isn't about money, love, or opportunity. It's about loyalty. Deep inside, many of us are still unconsciously loyal to the conditions we survived. We carry silent contracts we never agreed to out loud, but have honored our entire lives. If I'm happier than my parents, I'm disloyal. If I rest, I'm lazy. If life gets easier, I'll lose my edge. These beliefs don't feel like thoughts, they feel like rules. And rules don't need proof. They just need obedience. So even when your circumstances change, your nervous system keeps enforcing the old agreement. This is where the shadow identity takes over. The one who survives, the one who endures, the one who stays alert, responsible, and slightly tense, even in moments of success. That identity once protected you. It gave you meaning when things were hard. It gave you strength when there was no support. It gave you pride when rest wasn't an option. So letting go of suffering doesn't just feel like relief. It feels like abandonment. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He taught that the shadow is not only where we hide what's dark or shameful, it's also where we bury what felt unsafe to express. Ease, joy, softness, power. If being relaxed once made you vulnerable, if joy was followed by disappointment, if confidence was punished or mocked, then those qualities didn't disappear. They went underground. And over time, you may have learned to distrust them more than pain itself. This is why success can trigger guilt, why peace can feel undeserved, why happiness sometimes brings anxiety instead of gratitude. Not because you hate yourself, but because success challenges the story of who you believe you're allowed to be. Here's the key realization. You don't resist success because you're broken. You resist it because it threatens the identity that earned your survival. And your nervous system doesn't want to break a contract that once kept you alive. So the small lesson here isn't to let go of suffering overnight. It's to honor the part of you that needed it without letting it run your future. Because the moment you see this loyalty clearly, you gain a choice. You can appreciate the version of you that endured without forcing yourself to keep suffering to prove your worth. And once that choice appears, another question follows naturally. What happens when your system tries to protect you by pulling you back into old patterns? That's where we need to go next. Because understanding the shadow is powerful, but misreading it can quietly keep you stuck. And that's what most people don't realize until it's too late. This is where most self-help makes things worse. Because once people realize that success makes them anxious, they usually try to think their way out of it. And that's where the damage often happens. The first mistake is forcing positivity. You hear things like, just be grateful, you should feel lucky, others would kill to be where you are. But gratitude, when forced, bypasses the body. It silences discomfort instead of listening to it. So the nervous system doesn't calm down, it goes underground. And whatever goes underground tends to come back stronger. The second mistake is overanalyzing the mind. People read more books, watch more videos, label every feeling. But insight without regulation only sharpens awareness. It doesn't create safety. You can understand why you're anxious and still feel trapped inside it. In fact, overanalysis can amplify anxiety because the body feels observed but unsupported. The third mistake is burning bridges impulsively. When success feels overwhelming, some people quit relationships that finally became healthy. They leave jobs right as things stabilize. They ghost people who are actually safe. Not because those things are wrong, but because they're unfamiliar. The nervous system interprets too much calm as danger and reaches for escape. So people destroy what they don't yet know how to hold. And the fourth and most subtle mistake is calling anxiety intuition. You tell yourself something feels off. My gut is warning me. This doesn't align anymore. But here's the crucial distinction most people never learn. Intuition feels like calm clarity. There's space in it. There's steadiness. A trauma response feels urgent. Tight chest, racing thoughts, collapse, or impulsive action. Intuition doesn't demand immediate escape. Anxiety does. And when you confuse the two, you end up walking away from exactly what could have healed you. So here's the lesson that ties all of this together. Not everything uncomfortable is misaligned. Sometimes discomfort is simply unfamiliar safety. Growth will often feel awkward before it feels right. Expansion can feel heavy before it feels freeing. And if you treat every moment of tension as a sign to retreat, you'll stay loyal to the same patterns, even as your circumstances change. The goal isn't to override discomfort. It's to learn how to stay present inside it without panicking. Because once you stop making these mistakes, a new question becomes possible. If anxiety isn't a signal to run, how do you actually teach your body that success can be safe? That's where we go next. Because awareness alone doesn't create change. Regulation does. Healing isn't about becoming fearless, it's about becoming regulated. Most people assume healing means the fear disappears. But in reality, fear often fades after your body learns how to stay present without collapsing. So the work here isn't about pushing yourself harder or proving that you're brave. It's about teaching your nervous system that success doesn't require emergency mode. The first strategy is expansion in small doses. Instead of rushing forward or pulling back completely, let good things last just a little longer than usual. Stay in the healthy relationship 5 minutes longer when your chest tightens. Sit with praise before deflecting it. Allow a win to exist without immediately moving to the next goal. Small, repeated exposure rewires safety faster than dramatic breakthroughs ever could. The second strategy is listening to body-based signals, not thoughts. When anxiety shows up during success, don't ask, "Why am I like this?" Ask, what is my body doing right now? Notice your breath, your jaw, your shoulders. Tension isn't a problem to solve, it's information. When you stay curious instead of critical, your system begins to soften on its own. The third strategy is to reframe safety in the moment. Not with affirmations, not with forced positivity, but with simple present tense orientation. Nothing bad is happening right now. I am not in danger in this moment. This sensation will pass. These statements aren't meant to convince your mind. They're meant to anchor your body in the present. And finally, the most important shift, integration instead of avoidance. In the past, when success felt overwhelming, you escaped, you sabotaged, you distracted, you shrank. Now the work is to stay, to breathe inside the discomfort, to let your system adjust without taking control away from your future. Because regulation doesn't come from avoiding what triggers you. It comes from learning how to remain with it safely. Here's the reframe that changes everything. You don't need to deserve safety. You don't need to earn calm. You don't need to prove you're worthy of ease. You simply need to familiarize your body with it. And the more often you do, the less your system confuses expansion with danger. Success stops feeling like something you have to survive. And slowly, it begins to feel like something you're allowed to inhabit. Which brings us to the final question. If success no longer feels like a threat, who are you when you don't need to struggle anymore? That's where this journey truly opens. Good things feel unsafe not because they're wrong, but because your system has never lived here before. For most of your life, safety meant tension, movement, alertness, endurance. So when ease finally appears, when life softens instead of tightens, your body doesn't recognize it as home. Not yet. Expansion isn't the enemy. Stillness isn't weakness. Peace isn't the loss of ambition. The real work isn't pushing forward or pulling back. The real work is staying. Staying present when there's nothing to fix. Staying with your breath when there's no emergency. Staying inside success long enough for your nervous system to learn a new language. Because what you're experiencing isn't failure. It's unfamiliar safety asking to be learned. So here's a question worth sitting with, not answering too quickly. What if anxiety isn't telling you to stop, but asking you to slow down enough to let safety land? What if this tension isn't a warning sign, but a threshold? A moment where your old survival identity loosens and something quieter begins to take its place. If this resonated, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments, write, what good thing in your life feels strangely unsafe right now? Not to fix it, not to judge it, just to name it. And if you want to continue exploring this work, the nervous system, shadow integration, and growth without self-betrayal, you're welcome to subscribe and walk this path with us. Because you don't need to go back to survive. You've already done that part. Now you're learning something new. You're learning how to stay while you expand.